I knew something was wrong the second I smelled smoke behind my father's house, but I didn't expect to find my childhood burning in a metal bin. Those were just old papers, Diane said, not even looking at me. You don't need them anymore. Why would anyone burn letters a child wrote? Who were they meant for? And why did my dad look like he already knew the answer? I stepped closer and saw it, half a photograph, edges curled in flame. A younger version of me, and a woman I didn't recognize. When I reached for it, Diane grabbed my wrist. "Let it go, Anna." But I didn't. And when I turned the charred piece over, I saw a name barely surviving the fire. Elena. And suddenly I realized this wasn't about old memories. It was about something they never wanted me to find. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world, tell me where you are and what time it is for you right now. I read every comment, even if I can't reply to all of them. And if stories like this stay with you, you already know what to do. I didn't sleep that night. The smell of smoke clung to my clothes, my hair like it had followed me home on purpose. I placed the half-burned photograph on my kitchen counter and just stared at it for a long time, afraid that if I blinked too long, something about it would disappear. The edges were blackened brittle. The center had survived just enough to keep me from dismissing it as nothing. A little girl stood in the frame. Me. I recognized the dress instantly, white with tiny blue flowers. I used to wear it every Sunday. My hair was pulled into 2 uneven braids. I looked younger than I expected, maybe 5. And next to me, a woman. Her face was partially damaged by the fire, but I could still see the outline of her smile. Soft. Familiar in a way that made my chest tighten without understanding why. I flipped the photo over again. The ink had bled from the heat, but a few letters remained. Elena R. My fingers hovered over it. Elena. I said it out loud this time. It didn't sound like a stranger's name. It sounded like something I was supposed to remember. But I didn't. That was the part that scared me. I grabbed my phone and took a high-resolution photo of the fragment. Then I opened my laptop and uploaded it into a basic image enhancement tool I used sometimes for work presentations, cleaning up scanned documents, sharpening text. It wasn't anything advanced, but it was enough. Enough to make things worse. I adjusted contrast, reduced noise, played with shadows, and slowly, letter by letter, something came into focus beneath the burn marks. Elena Ruiz. The last name settled into my chest like a weight. Ruiz, not Morales. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse picking up. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a different family, a different story. I closed my laptop for a moment, pressing my palms flat against it as if I could stop whatever was about to unfold next. But I already knew I wouldn't stop, because now I had a question that refused to let go. Who was she, and why did Diane look like she'd seen a ghost when I touched that photo? The next morning, I showed up at work early. Too early. The office was quiet, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of someone making coffee in the break room. I sat at my desk and opened the file again. Elena Ruiz. I typed it into a search bar. Nothing useful, too common, too broad. I leaned back frustrated when a voice behind me said, "You've been staring at that screen like it owes you money." I turned. Maya Brooks stood there holding 2 coffees, one already extended toward me. "You look like you didn't sleep," she added. "I didn't," I said, taking the cup. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. "That was one of the reasons we worked well together." Maya didn't pry, she waited. So I told her. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Them burning the letters, I said, keeping my voice low. It didn't feel like cleaning. It felt like erasing something. Maya nodded slowly, and the photo, she asked. I turned the screen toward her. She leaned in, studying it. "Okay," she said after a moment. That's not random. I know. Do you remember her? No. Maya straightened. That's the part I don't like. I exhaled, gripping my coffee a little tighter. Can you help me clean up the image? I asked. Maybe there's something else we're missing. She pulled a chair over without hesitation. Let's see what we've got. We spent the next 30 minutes adjusting layers, isolating colors, trying to bring out anything the fire hadn't completely destroyed. It was slow work. Careful. Like we were trying not to disturb something fragile. At one point, Maya froze. Wait, she said. I leaned closer. What? She pointed at the background of the image, something I hadn't paid much attention to before. There, she said. That sign. I squinted. It was faint, blurred. But with a few adjustments, letters appeared. Valley Medical. My heart skipped. That's a hospital, Maya said. I nodded slowly. I think so. She looked at me again. Anna, why would you be at a hospital with someone you don't remember? I didn't answer. Because I already had a worse question forming in my head. Why would Diane burn every letter connected to that time? Around noon, my phone buzzed. A message from Diane. You need to stop digging into things that don't matter. I stared at the screen. She didn't ask. She didn't wonder. She knew. I typed back before I could overthink it. Why did you burn my letters? 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Because they were keeping you stuck. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just control wrapped in something that sounded almost reasonable. My jaw tightened. I locked my phone and set it down. She texted you, didn't she? Maya said quietly. I nodded. What did she say? That I should stop. Maya let out a short breath. Yeah. That's not suspicious at all. I gave a humorless laugh. I think I know where I need to go next. The hospital. I nodded again. Valley Medical Center. I said the name sitting heavier now. Maya studied me for a moment. You sure you're ready for whatever's there? No. Not even close. But that didn't matter anymore. Because whatever Diane tried to destroy, she didn't finish the job. And now I was holding the piece she missed. I don't think I have a choice, I said. That afternoon, I stood in front of the hospital. Valley Medical Center. The same name from the photo. The building looked ordinary, quiet. Like any other place people walked into every day without realizing their lives were about to change. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to steady something inside me. Trying to convince myself this was just a coincidence, that I wasn't about to open something I couldn't close. But then I thought about the fire, about Diane's hand tightening around my wrist, about my father not saying a single word, and just like that, the hesitation was gone. I walked inside. At the front desk, I asked about records. I kept it simple, calm, professional. The way I did in meetings when I needed answers without giving away too much. I'm looking for information connected to a patient named Elena Ruiz, I said. The receptionist's expression shifted instantly. Not suspicious, but careful. I'm sorry, she said. We can't release patient information without authorization. I expected that. I nodded. I'm not asking for full records, I said. Just confirmation of admission dates. Publicly accessible information. She hesitated, then glanced toward the back office. Let me check with records. I waited. Minutes stretched longer than they should have. My pulse stayed steady, but just barely. Finally, a man in his late 50s stepped out. Mr. Jenkins, he introduced himself. I repeated my request. Carefully. Precisely. He studied me for a moment, then said, "Follow me." The records room was quiet, cool, rows of files, both digital and physical. He sat down at a terminal and typed in the name, Elena Ruiz. I watched his face more than the screen, because sometimes the reaction tells you more than the data. And there it was. A pause. Subtle but real. "She was admitted here," he said finally. My chest tightened. "Do you have dates?" He hesitated again, then nodded. "Approximately 27 years ago. That lined up. Exactly." "And," I said slowly, "was there any legal documentation connected to that admission?" He frowned slightly, scrolled, then leaned closer to the screen. "There's a note," he said. My pulse spiked. "What kind of note?" He didn't answer right away, and when he did, his voice had changed. More careful. Reference to a guardianship filing, he said. The word landed harder than anything else I'd heard that day. Guardianship. Not medical, not casual, legal. I swallowed. "Who filed it?" I asked. He glanced at me, then back at the screen. And that hesitation, that split second, told me I wasn't ready for the answer. But I asked anyway. "Who filed it?" He exhaled slowly. "Carlos Morales." Everything inside me went quiet. Not loud, not chaotic, just still. Because now I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about Diane. My father had been part of it from the beginning, and whatever they tried to burn was never meant to be found. For a few seconds, I didn't react. I just stood there staring at the screen while Mr. Jenkins quietly clicked out of the file as if he already understood he'd said enough. Carlos Morales, my father. Not a witness, not a bystander. The one who filed it. "Is there anything else tied to that record?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Mr. Jenkins hesitated. "I can't release anything beyond what I've already shared," he said carefully. "But there is a reference number attached to a sealed file." "A sealed file," I repeated. He nodded once. "Those are typically connected to court proceedings, guardianship, custody disputes, sometimes emergency filings." "Emergency." The word echoed longer than it should have. "Can I access it?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not directly. You'd need a court order or authorization through legal counsel. Of course, there was always a wall, and someone had clearly made sure it stayed there. Can I at least have the reference number?" I asked. He studied me for a moment, weighing something I couldn't see. Then he wrote it down on a small piece of paper and slid it across the desk. I looked at it. A string of numbers and letters. Cold. Meaningless on the surface. But I knew better. That number was a door, and someone had locked it for a reason. "Thank you," I said quietly. He gave a small nod. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said. I wasn't sure I would, but I was certain I wouldn't be able to stop now. The drive back felt longer than it should have. Every red light stretched. Every turn felt heavier. Because the questions weren't abstract anymore. They had names, dates, documents, my father's signature. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in the car for a full minute before turning the engine off, trying to slow everything down, trying to organize what I knew, but it kept circling back to the same point. Guardianship. That wasn't something you filed casually. That was something you used when someone couldn't legally care for themselves or a child. And if my father filed it, then where was my mother? And why did Diane act like she never existed? I went upstairs, dropped my bag by the door, and pulled my laptop out before I even took off my shoes. The reference number sat on the counter where I'd left it earlier. I typed it in. Nothing. Not publicly searchable. That didn't surprise me. Sealed meant sealed, but not invisible. Not completely. I opened a legal database we used occasionally at work, mostly for compliance checks. It wasn't designed for deep court access, but it sometimes pulled metadata tied to case filings. I entered the reference number again. This time, something appeared. Barely anything, but enough. Case type guardianship petition status, sealed filing party C, Morales associated party E. Ruiz. My eyes locked on the last line. Associated party, not respondent, not defendant, just associated. Which meant whatever happened, it wasn't simple. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Okay, I said to the empty room. Okay, think. Don't react. Don't jump to conclusions. That's what I told myself. But then another thought slipped in. If Diane burned the letters, if my father filed the paperwork, then whatever happened between them and Elena Ruiz wasn't just something they survived. It was something they controlled. My phone buzzed again. I didn't have to check the name. I already knew. Diane. You went to the hospital. It wasn't a question. It never was with her. I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. She was watching. Or at least, she was still trying to stay ahead. I typed back. Why didn't you tell me about Elena Ruiz? The reply came slower this time. Because she doesn't matter. I let out a quiet breath through my nose. That was the first real lie I could prove. She mattered enough to burn evidence. She mattered enough to scare Diane. I typed again. Then why burn the letters 3 dots? Gone. Then back again. Because you were too young to understand. I stared at the screen. That line, that tone. I'd heard it my entire life. Not as an explanation, as a way to end the conversation, to make me feel like asking questions was the problem. I set the phone down without replying, because for the first time I didn't need her to answer. I needed someone who wouldn't filter the truth. By evening, I was sitting across from Daniel Harris, the attorney Maya had recommended. Mid-40s, calm, precise, the kind of person who didn't waste words. I slid the paper with the reference number across his desk. I need to know what this leads to, I said. He glanced at it, then looked up at me. Before I take this on, he said, I need context, fair. I told him everything, not emotionally, not dramatically, just facts. The burned letters, the photo, the hospital, the guardianship filing, my father's name, Diane's reaction. He didn't interrupt, didn't react, just listened. When I finished, he leaned back slightly. Okay, he said. Let's break this down. He turned the paper toward himself. Guardianship filings usually happen under specific conditions, he continued. A parent is incapacitated, deemed unfit, or legally challenged in their ability to care for a child. My chest tightened slightly. So you're saying I'm saying he cut in gently that whatever happened involved a legal dispute over your care? I swallowed. And the file is sealed. Yes. Why seal something like that? He tapped his pen lightly against the desk. Several reasons. Sensitive circumstances. Medical factors. He paused. Because someone requested it. I felt something shift in my chest. Requested it, I repeated. Yes. And if that happened, it means someone had both the means and the motivation to keep it out of reach. I didn't say Diane's name. I didn't have to. It was already there. Between us. Unspoken. Heavy. What can we do? I asked. He considered for a moment. I can file a petition to access the sealed records, he said. But it won't be immediate. And it won't be easy. I don't need easy, I said. He nodded once. I figured. He slid the paper back toward me. In the meantime, he added, You should be prepared for something. What? He held my gaze. Whatever is in that file was important enough for someone to hide it for decades. I let that settle because I already knew he was right, and I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. Not the way I used to be. What if it's worse than I think? I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. Then you'll finally know what you're dealing with. I left his office just after sunset. The sky was dim, the air cooling. Everything felt sharper, more defined, because now I had direction, a legal path, a way forward. But I also had something else, a realization I couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't just about finding Elena Ruiz or understanding my past. This was about proving something, that what Diane tried to erase was never hers to control. When I got home, I checked my phone. One missed call from my father. No voicemail, just silence. I stared at his name for a moment, then set the phone down. Because if he wanted to talk, he'd have to say more than he ever had before. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to make it easier for him. An hour later, another message came in, this time from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something made me open it anyway. There was no greeting, no explanation, just a single line. If you're looking for Elena Ruiz, you're already too late. My stomach dropped, and for the first time since this started, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Fear. Real sharp, immediate fear, because this wasn't just history anymore. Someone else knew I was searching, and they didn't want me to keep going. I read the message 3 times before I let myself react. If you're looking for Elena Ruiz, you're already too late. No name. No number I recognized. No explanation. Just certainty. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because I've spent enough years around people like Diane to know when a response gives them exactly what they want. Attention. Panic. Proof that they still control the pace. I set my phone face down on the table and forced myself to breathe slowly. Think, not react. That had always been the difference between surviving something and actually understanding it. The next morning, I forwarded the message to Daniel Harris. He called me within 10 minutes. Did you respond? He asked. No. Good, he said immediately. Keep it that way for now. I leaned against my kitchen counter, staring at the photo fragment still sitting where I'd left it. What does it mean? I asked. Is it a threat? Not necessarily, he said. But it's a signal of what that someone is aware you're asking questions, and they want to control your perception of the situation. I let that settle. Control your perception. That sounded familiar. That's what Diane does, I said quietly. There was a brief pause on the other end. Maybe Daniel said, but don't assume it's only her. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? If this involves legal filings, sealed records, and multiple parties from years ago, then there are likely more people connected to it than just your family. I hadn't considered that. Not fully. I'd been focused on Diane, on my father, on what happened inside that house. But this had been formal, documented, filed, which meant other eyes had seen it. Other hands had touched it. Okay, I said slowly. So what do I do? For now, you document everything, he replied. Messages, calls, any contact tied to this. And you let me handle the legal access to that file. And the message, we treat it as noise until it proves otherwise. Noise. I didn't like that word, but I understood why he used it. Because if I let it change my direction, then whoever sent it would already be winning. After the call, I picked up the photo again. Elena Ruiz. The name didn't feel abstract anymore. It felt close. Too close for someone to be telling me I was too late. Too late for what? Too late to find her. Too late to know the truth. Or too late to fix something that had already been broken beyond repair. I pressed my thumb lightly against the edge of the burned paper. "You're not gone," I said under my breath. It wasn't a belief. Not yet. Just a refusal. By midday, Daniel had already started the process. He filed a petition to request access to the sealed guardianship file citing my direct involvement and potential suppression of personal records. He warned me it could take time. Days. Weeks even. That was the part I wasn't good at, waiting. Especially when I knew something was actively being hidden. So I did what I always did when something didn't move fast enough. I worked around it. I called the hospital again. This time I asked for something different. "Do you have any affiliated clinics or satellite locations from that time period?" I asked the receptionist. There was a brief pause. "Yes," she said. "Several." "Why historical research?" I said smoothly. "I'm trying to track patient movement between facilities." It wasn't a lie. Just incomplete. She gave me 3 names. One of them stuck immediately. San Marcos Community Clinic. I didn't know why. Maybe because it sounded smaller, less protected, more likely to have gaps. Places like that didn't always follow the same rigid systems larger hospitals did, especially decades ago. I wrote it down. "Thank you," I said, and hung up. An hour later, I was on the road. The clinic was about 40 minutes outside the city. Quiet area, older buildings, the kind of place that hadn't been renovated in years. As I pulled into the parking lot, I felt that same hesitation again. Not fear. Not exactly. Just the awareness that every step forward made it harder to go back to not knowing. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment. Then I grabbed my bag and went inside. The waiting room was nearly empty. A nurse at the front desk looked up as I approached. "Hi," I said. "I'm trying to find historical information about a patient who may have been transferred here years ago." She gave me a polite but cautious smile. "We don't usually handle those requests directly." "I understand," I said. "I'm not asking for full records, just confirmation." She hesitated, then nodded toward a hallway. "Let me check with our administrator." I waited. This part was always the same. Ask carefully. Don't push too hard. Let them feel like they're choosing to help. A few minutes later, an older woman stepped out. Gray hair, sharp eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked. I repeated the name. "Elena Ruiz." The reaction was subtle, but it was there. A pause. A flicker of recognition. Not confusion. Recognition. "Yes," she said slowly. "That name sounds familiar." My pulse picked up. "She may have been transferred here from Valley Medical," I added. The woman nodded once. "Come with me." She led me into a small office filled with older filing cabinets, actual paper records. That alone told me I was in the right place. She pulled open a drawer, flipping through files with practiced precision. After a moment, she stopped. "Here," she said, pulling one out. She didn't hand it to me. She just looked at it for a second longer than necessary, then glanced up. "I can't give you a copy," she said, "but I can confirm something." I nodded. "That's all I need." She opened the file slightly, scanned a page, then looked back at me. "Elena Ruiz was here," she said, briefly, not long after her discharge from Valley Medical. My chest tightened, and I asked. The woman hesitated, then closed the file halfway. "There's a note," she said. "What kind of note?" Her expression shifted more serious now. About restricted contact. My stomach dropped. Restricted by who? She didn't answer immediately. And that silence, that pause, told me everything before she even spoke. By a legal guardian, she said finally. I swallowed. Carlos Morales. She shook her head. No, she said. My breath caught. Then who? She held my gaze for a second, then said the name that made everything fall into place. Diane Whitaker. For a moment the room felt smaller, quieter, like the air had shifted around me, because that changed everything. My father filed the guardianship, but Diane enforced it, controlled it, extended it. Was there anything else, I asked, my voice lower now. The woman hesitated again, then flipped one more page. There's a mention of attempted contact, she said. Multiple times. My chest tightened. From Alina, she nodded. And the outcome? She closed the file. All attempts were denied. Denied. Not ignored, not lost. Denied. On purpose, I stood there for a second, letting that settle into something solid, something undeniable. Then I nodded. Thank you, I said quietly. She gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Not sympathy, not exactly, more like recognition, as if she'd seen versions of this before. Be careful what you uncover, she said. I don't think I get to choose that anymore, I replied. Back in my car, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine. Because now it wasn't a question. It was a pattern. My father started it. But Diane controlled it. For years. She didn't just burn letters. She made sure they never reached me in the first place. And suddenly that message from the night before felt different. If you're looking for Elena Ruiz, you're already too late. Too late for what? Too late to stop me, or too late because someone thought they'd already erased everything I reached for my phone. Opened the message again, stared at it for a long second, then locked the screen, because whoever sent it was about to realize something. I wasn't looking for permission anymore. I was building a case. That night Daniel called again. I filed the petition, he said. We should hear something within a few days. Good, I replied. There was a pause. You sound different, he noted. I found something, I said, and for the first time since this started, I didn't feel like I was chasing the truth. I felt like I was catching up to it, but there was still one thing I didn't understand, one piece that didn't fit. If Diane went this far to block Elena, to control every letter, every attempt, then why now? Why burn everything now? What changed? As I stood in my kitchen later that night, staring at the half-burned photo again, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Not on the front, on the back, beneath the name. Faint, almost invisible. A second line. Numbers. A date. I leaned closer, carefully adjusting the light. And when it finally came into focus, my breath caught. Because it wasn't just any date. It was recent. Far more recent than it should have been. I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there leaning over the counter, staring at the numbers on the back of the photo like they might rearrange themselves into something less impossible. But they didn't. The date stayed exactly where it was. Clear. Recent. Real. Not something from my childhood. Not something buried decades ago. Something current. Something that meant this wasn't just a past Diane had tried to erase. It was something she was still actively hiding. I reached for my phone and took another photo this time, focusing only on the back of the fragment. I adjusted the exposure, zoomed in, sharpened it the same way Maya had shown me. The numbers became clearer. Month, day, year. And beneath it, a faint string of digits that didn't belong to any format I recognized at first. Not a case number, not a phone number. Too short for one, too structured for the other. I stared at it until the pattern clicked. A patient ID, or something close to it, which meant one thing. This photo wasn't just old, it had been handled recently, logged, filed, processed. Someone had touched it, and then tried to burn it. I grabbed my keys before I could second-guess myself. It was too late to go back to the clinic, but not too late to ask someone who would understand what I was looking at. Maya picked up on the second ring. "Please tell me you're not working," she said. "I found something," I said. "That was all it took. I'm listening." 20 minutes later, I was at her place, the photo spread out on her dining table under better lighting. She leaned over it, narrowing her eyes. "Okay," she said slowly. "That's definitely not random. I thought it was just a date at first," I said, "but look at this part." I pointed to the numbers beneath. She adjusted the angle of the lamp. "Yeah," she murmured. "That's a code. Medical or administrative." "Recent?" I asked. She glanced at me. "Very." My stomach tightened. "So someone processed this photo recently," I said. "Or attached it to something recent," she corrected. I frowned slightly. "What's the difference? If it was scanned or filed, it would be part of a record," she said. "Which means this photo isn't just a memory, it's evidence tied to a file." A file. My mind went straight to the sealed guardianship case. "You think it's connected?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then she nodded. "I think you're not just uncovering something old," she said. "I think you're stepping into something that's still active in some way. Active." The word didn't sit right, because that meant someone right now was still maintaining control over whatever this was. I left Maya's place just before midnight. This time I didn't feel tired. I felt focused, because now I had something concrete. A date. A code. Proof that whatever Diane tried to destroy was still being tracked somewhere. The next morning, I went straight back to Daniel's office. He was already there when I arrived, reviewing something on his tablet. "I need you to look at this," I said, placing the photo in front of him. He studied it in silence for a moment, then leaned closer. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "In the fire," I said. This was the only piece that survived. He nodded slowly. "And you're sure about the timeline?" "Yes." He pointed to the date. "This is recent," he said. "I know. And this," he tapped the code lightly. "This isn't random. It's formatted like a reference tag." "For what?" He leaned back, slightly considering. "For a document. A file. Possibly a scanned attachment in a legal or medical record." My pulse picked up. "So it's tied to something that still exists." "Yes," he said simply. I swallowed. "Can we trace it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for his computer and typed something in. Cross-referencing, I assumed. After a minute, he stopped. "There's a possibility," he said, "but it depends on where it's stored, and if it's tied to the sealed case," he looked at me, "then it strengthens your position." "How?" "Because it suggests the case wasn't just sealed and forgotten," he said. "It's been accessed, possibly updated." My chest tightened. "By who?" "That's what we need to find out." I sat back in the chair, letting that settle, because suddenly everything felt closer. Not just emotionally, structurally. Like I wasn't chasing something scattered anymore. I was following a system, a paper trail, one that someone had tried to erase but hadn't finished. "Why would Diane burn the letters now?" I asked quietly. Daniel looked at me for a long second. "Because something changed," he said. What kind of change? The kind that makes old evidence dangerous again. That answer stayed with me the entire drive home, because it made more sense than anything else. Diane didn't act randomly. She controlled. She planned. She maintained. So if she burned those letters now, it wasn't about the past. It was about the present. When I pulled into the driveway of my father's house that evening, I didn't hesitate. This time, I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked straight up to the door and knocked once. Firm. Deliberate. It took a few seconds. Then the door opened. Carlos stood there, his expression already tense. "Anna," he said. "I was going to call you." "Not this time," I said, stepping inside without waiting. He didn't stop me. That told me everything I needed to know. Diane was in the living room. Of course she was. Sitting exactly where she always sat. Composed. Controlled. Like nothing had changed. But something had. And for the first time, I wasn't walking into that house as someone asking for answers. I was walking in with them. I held up the photo. "You missed when I said." Her eyes flicked to it. Just for a second. But that was enough. Because the control, the calm cracked. Barely. But I saw it. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice steady but thinner than before. "It means this wasn't just about old letters," I said. "This was about something you didn't want me to connect." Carlos looked between us, already uneasy. "Anna." I cut him off. "No," I said. "Not this time." I stepped closer. Close enough that Diane couldn't pretend she didn't see the numbers on the back. "This date," I said quietly. "It's recent." Her expression didn't change, but her silence did. "And this code," I continued, "it's tied to a file." Still nothing. "But here's the part I don't understand," I said, tilting my head slightly. "If everything you've said is true, if Elena Ruiz doesn't matter—" I let the question hang for just a second longer. "Then why is her name still being processed in a system today?" Carlos froze. Diane didn't answer. Not immediately, because this time there wasn't an easy way to redirect the conversation. No emotional angle. No dismissal. Just facts. And for the first time, she didn't have control over them. "You need to leave," she said finally, not loud, not angry, just tight. Controlled in a way that felt different. Like she wasn't trying to convince me anymore. She was trying to contain something. Why I asked. Her eyes met mine. And this time, there was something there I hadn't seen before. Not guilt, not fear. Something sharper. Something closer to calculation. "Because you don't understand what you're getting into," she said. I held her gaze. "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm starting to." Carlos stepped forward slightly. "Anna," he said, his voice lower now. "We should talk about this privately." I didn't look at him. "Were you there?" I asked. For what he said. When she blocked those letters, I said. When she denied every attempt Elena made to reach me. Silence. That was my answer. I nodded once. "Okay," I said, because I didn't need anything else from him. "Not anymore." I turned back to Diane. "This isn't going away," I said. She didn't respond. But I could see it now, clearer than before. She wasn't trying to stop me from finding the truth. She was trying to delay it. Which meant there was still something I hadn't uncovered yet. Something big enough to make her burn everything. Something recent enough to leave a trail. And whatever it was, I was closer to it than she expected. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I placed the photo back on the counter. This time, I didn't just look at the date. I looked at what it meant. Recent activity, a connected file, a sealed case that might not be as sealed as it should be, and a woman who had spent decades controlling every piece of information around it. But control only works when no one questions it, and now everything was being questioned. My phone buzzed again. This time I recognized the number. Daniel. I answered immediately. I found something he said. My chest tightened. What? There was a brief pause. Then that reference code on the photo, he said. It matches a document that was accessed last week. My grip tightened around the phone. Accessed by whose silence? Then, that's the problem, he said. The access log is incomplete. Incomplete. Not missing. Not erased. Just incomplete. Which meant someone had tried to hide their tracks but hadn't done it cleanly, and that told me one thing. Whoever was involved was getting sloppy. Incomplete how I asked, already reaching for a pen without realizing it. Daniel didn't answer immediately. I could hear papers shifting on his end, the quiet rhythm of someone double-checking before saying something that couldn't be taken back. There's a timestamp, he said. There's a document ID. But the user field, the person who accessed it, it's been partially scrubbed. Partially, I repeated. Yes. Not erased completely. Just masked. I wrote that down. Masked. Can that be undone? I asked. Sometimes, he said. Depends on the system. But the fact that it wasn't fully removed suggests whoever did it either didn't have full administrative access or didn't want to trigger an audit. I leaned back in my chair. So they wanted it hidden, I said, but not enough to make it obvious something was missing. Exactly. That meant intention, precision, and a mistake. Do we have anything at all? I asked. There was a pause. Then initials, he said. My grip tightened on the pen. What initials? DW. I didn't even need to think about it. Diane Whitaker, but something about it didn't sit right. Not fully. Because Diane wasn't careless. Not with something like this. Are you sure? I asked. It's what's left in the log, he said, but I wouldn't treat it as definitive. Why not? Because it's almost too convenient, he replied. If someone wanted to make it look like her leaving just enough behind would do it. I went quiet. Because that thought, that possibility, shifted the entire frame. This wasn't just about what Diane did. It was about who else might be moving around this story now. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time staring at the notebook in front of me. DW. It could be Diane. Or it could be someone who wanted me to think it was Diane. And that message, "You're already too late." That didn't sound like her. Diane didn't warn. She controlled. She redirected. She minimized. She didn't announce things, which meant there was someone else in this. Someone watching. Someone close enough to the system to access sealed records, and careless enough to leave traces. The next morning I called the clinic again. This time I asked for the administrator directly. When she came on the line, I kept my tone steady. There was a file connected to Elena Ruiz that was accessed recently, I said. Do you keep logs for historical records? There was a pause. Yes, she said slowly. Why, I need to know who accessed it. That's not information we can release. I'm not asking for a copy, I said. Just confirmation of whether access was internal or external. Another pause. Longer this time. Then external, she said. My chest tightened. Are you sure? Yes. Do you know from where? No, she said. But it wasn't one of our staff accounts. I thanked her and ended the call. External access, which meant someone outside the clinic, possibly outside the hospital system, had reached into those records. That narrowed things, and expanded them at the same time. By noon, I was back in Daniel's office. He had the same look he'd had the first day I walked in. Calm, focused. Already a few steps ahead. External access lines up with what I'm seeing, he said as I sat down. So it's not Diane, I asked. I didn't say that, he replied. She could still be involved. But she's not the only one with an interest in this anymore. I leaned forward slightly. Who else would care about a guardianship case from almost 30 years ago? He tapped his pen once against the desk. Anyone whose name is tied to it. I frowned. Besides my father? He nodded slowly. And besides Elena Ruiz. That left one possibility, someone I hadn't thought about. Not directly, because I didn't know they existed. Was there anyone else listed in the file, I asked? He hesitated, then turned his monitor slightly toward me. From the metadata I was able to pull, he said, there's a secondary reference. I leaned closer. What kind of reference? A witness. The word landed quietly, but it shifted everything. A witness to what I asked. That's what we don't know yet, he said. But their name appears multiple times across the limited entries. My pulse picked up again. Who? He looked at me, then said it. Adrian Keller. The name meant nothing to me. No memory, no connection. Just unfamiliar. I've never heard of him, I said. That doesn't mean he wasn't there, Daniel replied. I nodded slowly, because that was exactly the problem. That afternoon, I sat in my car outside my apartment building, staring at the name written in my notebook. Adrian Keller, witness. To what? A custody dispute, a medical situation, something that required a legal guardian to step in. And more importantly, why was he still connected to this now? Because if someone accessed those records last week, and it wasn't Diane, then it had to be someone with a reason, a current reason. I went upstairs and opened my laptop. This time I didn't search for Elena. I searched for him, Adrian Keller. The results came faster than I expected, not because he was common, because he wasn't. There weren't many entries, but one stood out immediately. A profile, public, professional. Adrian Keller, licensed social worker, specializing in family mediation and child welfare cases. My stomach tightened. That wasn't random. That was directly connected. I clicked through, scrolled, read. He'd worked in the same county years ago, around the same time as the hospital admission, and then I saw it, a small note buried in an archived article, involved in a high-conflict guardianship case that led to policy review. No names, no details, just enough to tell me one thing. He was there when everything happened. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Diane. It was an unknown number. Again. I stared at it for a second before opening the message. You're asking the wrong questions. My chest tightened, because this time it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like direction. I typed back before I could stop myself. Then tell me the right ones. The reply came almost instantly. Ask why the case was sealed, not why the letters were burned. I stared at the screen, because that was a shift. A deliberate one, from the surface to the core. And suddenly everything I thought I was chasing felt smaller, like I'd been looking at symptoms, not the cause. I grabbed my keys again, because there was only one person who could answer that question, or at least start to, Adrian Keller. As I stepped out into the evening air, one thought stayed with me. Whoever was messaging me, they didn't want me to stop. They wanted me to go deeper, and that was more dangerous than anything Diane had done so far, because it meant the truth. Whatever it was bigger than all of us. I didn't call Adrian Keller right away. That would have been the obvious move, and at this point I had learned something the hard way. Nothing about this situation rewarded obvious. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my notebook beside it, going over everything again. Not emotionally, structurally. What I knew, what I could prove, what was still assumption. That was how I worked. It was how I stayed in control when everything else started slipping. Fact. My father filed a guardianship petition tied to Elena Ruiz. Fact. Diane enforced restricted contact and intercepted letters for years. Fact. The case was sealed. Fact. Someone accessed the records last week and tried to hide it. Fact. Adrian Keller was listed as a witness in that case. Fact. An unknown person was guiding me subtly, deliberately. And then there was the question they told me to ask. Why was the case sealed? Not why the letters were burned. Not why Diane lied, but why the system itself locked it away. That wasn't a family decision. That was a legal one, which meant whatever happened had crossed a line big enough to require protection. For someone. I closed my laptop and picked up my phone. This time I didn't search. I dialed. Adrian Keller's office number rang twice before someone picked up. Keller Family Services, a woman said. How can I help you? I'm trying to reach Adrian Keller, I said. It's regarding a case he was involved in years ago. There was a pause. May I ask what this is about? It's personal, I said. And it involves a guardianship filing from approximately 27 years ago. Another pause. Longer this time. Hold, please. The line clicked. Silence. Then a different voice came on. Older. Measured. Careful. This is Adrian Keller. I didn't speak for a second. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I suddenly understood something. He already knew why I was calling. I think you were involved in a case connected to my name, I said finally, Hannah Morales. There was no immediate response, just a quiet intake of breath. And then I was wondering when you would call, he said. I didn't sit down. I just stood there in the middle of my kitchen, gripping the phone a little tighter. You know who I am, I said. Yes. How? Because your case, he said slowly, was one of the few I never forgot. That wasn't reassuring. That doesn't answer my question, I said. You're right, he replied. It doesn't. There was a brief silence between us. Then he spoke again. If you're asking about the guardianship filing, I can confirm I was present during the evaluation process, he said. Evaluation of what I asked. Of your living situation, he said. My chest tightened. At the time, there were concerns raised about your mother's ability to maintain custody. That's what I was told, I said, that she was unstable, that she left, and you believe that he asked. I didn't answer, because belief wasn't the point anymore. Why was the case sealed, I asked. He didn't respond immediately, and that hesitation, that careful pause told me this was the question that mattered. Mr. Keller, I said, my voice steadier now. Someone accessed that file last week. Someone is trying to keep me from understanding what happened. So I'm asking you directly, why was it sealed? Another silence. Longer this time. Then, because the original recommendation was not followed, he said. My grip tightened. What does that mean? It means he continued that the outcome of the case did not align with what was documented during the evaluation. My mind started moving faster. You recommended something else, I said. Yes. And it didn't happen. No. Why not? His voice shifted slightly. More careful now. Because new information was introduced late in the process, he said. Information that changed the court's decision. What kind of information? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he said something that made my stomach drop. Information that questioned your safety. My chest tightened. With my mother, I asked. Another pause. Yes, he said. The word landed heavily, but something about it didn't feel complete. What kind of safety concerns? I pressed. I can't go into full detail without access to the file, he said, but I can tell you this. What was presented at the final hearing was significantly different from what I observed during my evaluation. Different how? More severe, he said. More urgent. My heart was beating faster now, and you didn't agree with it, no. Then why didn't you challenge it? I did, he said quietly. And it wasn't enough. I closed my eyes for a second, because now the shape of it was starting to form. Not clearly, not completely, but enough to feel wrong. You said my case was one you never forgot, I said. Yes. Why, this time he didn't hesitate, because it was one of the few times I believed a child was placed somewhere less stable than the alternative. The words hit harder than anything else he'd said. Less stable. You're saying... I started then stopped, because saying it out loud made it real. I'm saying, he continued carefully, that based on what I observed at the time, your mother did not present the level of risk that was ultimately claimed in court. My chest tightened. So the information that changed the decision was not consistent with my evaluation, he finished. I opened my eyes and stared at the wall in front of me, because now everything was shifting. Diane didn't just block letters. She didn't just control communication. She may have changed the outcome of the case itself. How does something like that even happen? I asked quietly. He exhaled slowly. Late evidence submissions, testimony, statements that can't be fully verified in time. It's rare, but it happens. And then it gets sealed, I said. Yes. To protect who? Another pause. Usually, he said, to protect the child. I let out a quiet, hollow laugh. That didn't work out the way they planned. No, he said softly. It didn't. I turned away from the counter, pacing slowly now, because there was still something that didn't make sense. If you disagreed with the outcome, I said, then why didn't anything change later? It should have, he admitted. But once a case like that is sealed and time passes, it becomes harder to reopen without new evidence. New evidence. The words echoed in my head. The letters. The photo. The records. That's why someone accessed the file, I said. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. There was a pause on the line. Yes, he said. And it wasn't Diane, I added. Another pause. Longer this time. No, he said finally. My breath caught. Then who? When he answered, everything shifted again. Someone who was there, he said. At the end. My grip tightened around the phone. You mean at the final hearing? Yes. And who was that? There was a moment of silence. Then? You need to be careful, Anna, he said. I didn't ask for that, I replied. I asked for a name. Another pause. Then the attending physician, he said. The one who submitted the final report. My mind locked on to that instantly. Do you know their name? Yes. Then tell me. He exhaled slowly. Dr. Samuel Whitaker. Everything went still again. Whitaker. Same last name. Not coincidence. Not even close. My voice came out quieter than I expected. Diane's? Yes, he said. Her brother. I didn't speak. Because suddenly, the entire structure made sense. The guardianship. The sealed case. The sudden shift in evidence. The control. The letters being blocked. The records being accessed now. This wasn't just Diane acting alone. This was a system. Built, maintained, protected. For years. And I had just stepped into the center of it. Anna, Adrian said carefully, if you're going to pursue this, You need to understand something. What the truth isn't just buried, he said. It was constructed. I closed my eyes briefly, because now I understood why someone had messaged me, why they told me to ask the right question, why they didn't try to stop me. Because this wasn't something that could be hidden forever. Not if I kept going. When I hung up, the room felt different. Not quieter, sharper, because I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't piecing together fragments. I had a direction, a name, a connection that explained everything Diane had done and everything she was still trying to protect. Dr. Samuel Whitaker. And if he had submitted the report that changed everything, then somewhere there had to be a version of the truth before it was changed. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I didn't hesitate this time. I opened it immediately. Good. You're getting closer. I stared at the words, then typed back. You knew about him? The reply came seconds later. I was there. My chest tightened. Before I could respond again, another message appeared. Find the original report. I looked at the photo on the counter. The date, the code, the access log, the missing pieces. And for the first time since this started, I knew exactly what I was looking for. Not just answers, proof. Because if the truth had been changed once, then it could still be found. And this time, no one was going to burn it before I saw it. I didn't answer the message. Not right away. I just stood there staring at the screen, letting the words settle into something solid. I was there. Find the original report. Whoever this was, they weren't guessing. They weren't speculating. They knew exactly where to push. Which meant one thing. They had access to something I didn't. Yet. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in, gave a simple explanation, and shut my laptop before anyone could ask follow-up questions. Because today wasn't about maintaining normal. It was about narrowing the gap between what had been documented and what had been changed. I drove back to San Marcos Community Clinic. Same parking lot, same aging building. But this time, I didn't hesitate before going in. The administrator recognized me immediately. You again, she said not unkindly. I need one more thing, I said. Her expression tightened slightly. I told you yesterday I can't release full records. I'm not asking for full records, I replied. Just confirmation about a physician report tied to Elena Ruiz's transfer. That got her attention. Which physician? Dr. Samuel Whitaker. The reaction was immediate. Not dramatic, but precise. A shift in posture, a narrowing of her eyes. Yes, she said slowly. He was involved. Did he file a report here, I asked. She hesitated, then nodded once. Yes. My chest tightened. Is it still in your system? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at me carefully. As I said before she began, we don't release, I'm not asking you to release it. I cut in, keeping my voice calm. I just need to know if the report exists in its original form. Silence. Then, no, she said. The word landed harder than I expected. No, I repeated. It's not in our active system, she clarified. Only a reference entry remains, meaning it was removed, meaning it was archived or transferred, she said carefully. Transferred where? Where she shook her head. That I can't tell you. I held her gaze. Can you tell me when it was last accessed? Another pause. Then recently, she admitted. How recent? She hesitated again. Within the past week. That lined up exactly with what Daniel had found, by who I asked. She didn't answer. And this time, I didn't push. Because I already knew what she would say. Nothing. I thanked her and stepped outside. The air felt heavier than it had the day before. Because now Now I wasn't just chasing something hidden. I was chasing something that had been moved, relocated, possibly altered. Again. I got back into my car but didn't start it. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the message thread. "You said you were there." I typed it slowly, then added. At the final hearing, the reply came after a longer pause this time. "Yes." My pulse picked up. "Who are you?" Another pause. Then someone who couldn't stop it. That answer didn't give me a name, but it gave me something more useful, a position. Not the person who caused it, not the person who controlled it, someone who witnessed it and failed to intervene, which narrowed things a lot. I stared at the screen thinking, then typed again. "You said find the original report. If it's not at the clinic, where is it?" This time, the response didn't come immediately. Minutes passed. Long enough for doubt to creep in. Long enough for me to wonder if I'd pushed too far. Then check the court, not the hospital. My grip tightened around the phone. Of course. The hospital held copies. But the court? The court held the version that mattered. The version that changed everything. I didn't wait. I started the engine and drove straight to Daniel's office. He looked up the second I walked in. "I think I know where the report is," I said. He didn't ask how. "Court records," he said. I nodded. Not the sealed file I added. The version that was submitted at the final hearing. He leaned back slightly thinking. "That would be part of the case record," he said. "Which means if it was altered or replaced, there may still be a trace." "That's what I'm hoping." He studied me for a moment. "Where did you get this?" he asked. I hesitated. Just for a second. Then, "Someone who was there," I said. His expression didn't change much, but I could tell he understood the implication. "And you trust them?" he asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I trust the direction they're pointing." That was enough. He nodded once. "All right," he said. "Then we look at the court." The courthouse was quieter than I expected. Old building, tall ceilings, everything echoing just slightly. We went through the usual process requests, identification, limited access protocols. Daniel handled most of it. I watched, listened, learned. Because this system didn't respond to emotion. It responded to precision. After nearly an hour, we were led to a small records room. Not the sealed archive, but adjacent, where supporting documents and indexed entries sometimes remained accessible in partial form. A clerk handed Daniel a file folder. Thin, too thin. "That's all we have access to without court authorization," she said. He nodded. "That's fine." We sat down at a table, opened the folder. Inside, a handful of documents, indexes, references, summaries, but not the full file. Not yet. I flipped through them carefully, slowly, looking for anything that stood out. And then I saw it. A listing. Final evaluation report, submitted by Dr. Samuel Whitaker. My pulse spiked. "That's it," I said quietly. Daniel leaned in. The document itself wasn't there, but the entry was, and beneath it, a notation. Amended. My breath caught. "Amended," I repeated. Daniel's expression sharpened. "That means the original report was changed," he said, "or replaced." I looked back at the page. And there, smaller, almost easy to miss, was a second line. "Original submission withdrawn." My hands went still, because that wasn't subtle. That wasn't procedural. That was deliberate. "Can we get the original?" I asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he read the notation again, then said something that made everything shift. "Not from here," he said. Then where he looked at me, from whoever withdrew it. The room felt quieter, smaller, because now we weren't just dealing with something hidden. We were dealing with something that had been actively replaced. The original report, the one Adrian Keller based his evaluation on, had existed, and then it had been removed. I leaned back slowly, my mind catching up to what that meant. Diane's brother submitted the final report, I said. Yes, and that report changed the outcome. Yes, and the original report was withdrawn before the decision Daniel finished. I swallowed. So the truth existed. For a moment, he said, and then it was replaced. I stared at the file in front of me, because now it wasn't a question of what happened. It was a question of how far they went to make sure it stayed buried. As we left the courthouse, my phone buzzed again. I didn't even check the number. I already knew. I opened it. You found it. I stopped walking, then typed back. They replaced the report. The reply came instantly. Yes. My chest tightened. Then I asked the only question that mattered now. Where is the original? There was a pause, longer than before. Then with him. My breath caught. Him. Not Diane. Not the court. Not the hospital. I typed again. Who the answer came in a single line. The one who signed it. I lowered the phone slowly, because I already knew who that was. Dr. Samuel Whitaker. And if he still had the original report, then everything Diane built, every lie, every restriction, every burned letter was sitting in one place, waiting to be found. I didn't say anything for a full minute after reading the message. The one who signed it. There was no ambiguity left. Dr. Samuel Whitaker. Diane's brother. The man who had the authority to reshape a legal outcome with a single report. And if the original still existed, then it wasn't lost. It was being kept. Daniel didn't rush me. He stood beside me on the courthouse steps, hands in his coat pockets, watching the street while I processed everything. Well, he asked after a moment. I turned the phone toward him. He read the message without reacting, then looked back at me. You were right, he said quietly. This isn't just about access. It's about control of the narrative. I nodded once. Can we get it? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, Do you know where he is? I shook my head. Not yet. Then that's the first step, he said. By the time I got home, I already had his name pulled up again on my laptop. Dr. Samuel Whitaker. The results were different this time, more fragmented, less current, no active hospital listings, no recent publications, which meant one thing. He wasn't practicing publicly anymore. I kept digging, licensing databases, archived directories, old affiliations, and then I found it. A registration record. Inactive. Last known address attached. Not a hospital, not a clinic, a private residence, about an hour outside the city. My pulse picked up, because that meant he hadn't disappeared. He had stepped away, quietly. I called Daniel. I found an address, I said. There was a pause. Then, you're not going alone. I'm not planning to, I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll meet you there, he said. The drive felt longer than it actually was. Not because of traffic, because of what I was about to do. Up until now, everything had been indirect. Records, files, messages, pieces of a system. But this was direct. This was the person who signed the report that changed my life. The person who might still have the original truth. The house was exactly what I expected. Not large, not neglected, just quiet. set back from the road surrounded by trees. The kind of place someone chooses when they don't want to be easily found. Daniel arrived a few minutes after I did. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. We both knew what this was. I walked up to the door and knocked. Once. Then again. It took longer than it should have. Long enough for doubt to creep in. Long enough for me to wonder if I was too late after all. Then the door opened. An older man stood there. Gray hair, tired eyes, careful posture. He looked at me like he already knew who I was. "Anna Morales," he said. Not a question. I didn't flinch. "Yes." He glanced past me briefly at Daniel, then back at me. "I was expecting you sooner," he said. That made something in my chest tighten. "Then you know why I'm here," I said. He nodded once. "Yes." He stepped aside. "Come in." The house was quiet, orderly, not sterile but controlled, like everything inside it had a place and a reason. We sat at a small table in what looked like a study. No small talk, no pretense. I placed the photo on the table between us. "This survived," I said. His eyes moved to it, and for the first time I saw something shift in his expression. Recognition. Regret. "Not completely," he said softly. "That wasn't the goal," I replied. Silence settled between us for a moment. Then I said the words I'd been holding back since the courthouse. "You submitted the final report." He didn't deny it. "Yes, and the original was withdrawn." "Yes, why?" He leaned back slightly, exhaling. "Because I was told it was incomplete," he said. "By who I asked." He met my eyes. "My sister. Diane." "Of course." "What did the original report say?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at the photo again, then back at me. "It didn't support the removal," he said. My chest tightened. Meaning your mother did not meet the threshold of risk that was later presented. There it was. Clear. Direct. Not interpretation. Fact. "Then why did you change it?" I pressed. His jaw tightened slightly. "Because additional information was presented," he said. "The same information Adrian Keller mentioned." "Yes. And you believed it?" Another pause. "Then no." The word landed quietly, but it carried more weight than anything else he'd said. "Then why sign it?" I asked. This time he didn't look away. "Because I was told there would be legal consequences if I didn't," he said. My stomach dropped. "From who?" "From your father's legal counsel," he said, "and reinforced by your stepmother." I let that settle, because now the picture was complete. Not just manipulation, pressure, coordination, a system built to override the truth. "Do you still have the original report?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately, and that silence, that hesitation told me everything before he even spoke. "Yes," he said. My breath caught, where he stood up slowly, walked to a cabinet in the corner of the room, unlocked it, reached inside, and pulled out a thin folder. He placed it on the table in front of me, carefully, like it mattered, because it did. "This is the only copy I kept," he said. Why, I asked. Because I knew one day, he said quietly, someone would ask the right question. My hands hovered over the folder for a second before I opened it. Inside, a report. Typed. Signed. Dated. Older than the one submitted to the court. I scanned the first page, then the second, then the third, and with every line, everything inside me shifted. Because it wasn't vague. It wasn't uncertain. It was clear, direct, consistent with everything Adrian Keller had said. Your mother did not present a danger. Your removal was not recommended. I closed the folder slowly, my hand steadier than I expected, because this wasn't just closure. This was proof, the kind that didn't rely on memory or interpretation or someone else's version of events. Just facts, documented, signed, hidden. I looked up at him. You knew, I said. He didn't argue. I suspected he corrected, and I failed to stop it. I nodded once, because that part was already done. You don't need to stop it now, I said. You just needed to keep this. He let out a slow breath. I wasn't sure you'd ever find it, he admitted. I wasn't supposed to, I said. As we stood to leave, he said one more thing. Your stepmother didn't do this alone, he said. I know, but she believed she was protecting something, he added. I paused, not turning back. Her version of control, I said. No, he replied quietly. Her version of family. That stayed with me as I walked out, because it explained something I hadn't fully understood before. Diane didn't see herself as the villain. She saw herself as the one who held everything together, even if it meant rewriting the truth to do it. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, not because everything was resolved, but because the truth was no longer abstract. It was in my hands. As we got back to the car, Daniel glanced at me. What now? He asked. I looked down at the folder, then back at the road ahead. Now, I said, we stop letting them decide what the story is. My phone buzzed one more time. I already knew. You found it. I didn't reply, because this time I didn't need direction. I had everything I came for, and more than that, I had something they never expected me to have. Proof they couldn't burn. I didn't open the folder again that night, not because I was afraid of what it said I already knew, but because I wanted to choose how I used it. For years, everything about my life had been decided in rooms I wasn't in by people who spoke in terms I didn't understand. Documents filed, reports rewritten, silence turned into control. This time I wasn't reacting, I was deciding. The next morning I asked Daniel to arrange a formal meeting, not a confrontation, not an argument, a documented conversation, with witnesses, with records, with no room left for revision. He understood immediately. We do this clean, he said. No emotion driving the structure. Exactly, I replied. We met 3 days later. Same house, same living room. But everything about it felt different. Diane was already seated when we arrived, posture straight, hands folded in her lap like she was hosting something she didn't approve of, but intended to control anyway. Carlos stood behind her, not sitting, not speaking. That was familiar. What wasn't was me. I didn't wait to be invited. I sat across from her and placed the folder on the table between us. She didn't touch it. She just looked at it, then at me. You brought a lawyer, she said. Of course I did, I replied. Her eyes shifted briefly to Daniel, then back to me. You've made this very dramatic, Anna. No, I said calmly. You made it complicated. I'm just making it clear. Silence. Heavy, controlled silence. The kind she used to win with. But not this time. I opened the folder, turned it so it faced her. Original evaluation report, I said. Signed by your brother. Her expression didn't break, but something behind it moved. You've been looking in places you don't understand, she said. I understand enough, I replied. This report doesn't support removal. It doesn't support restricted contact. It doesn't support anything that happened after. Carlos shifted slightly behind her. Still quiet. Still not intervening. I looked at him briefly, then back at her. The final report submitted to the court contradicts this one, I continued, and the original was withdrawn before the decision. She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either. She just sat there, calculating. You think a piece of paper changes anything? She asked. I let a small breath out. Because that was the moment everything finally made sense. It already did, I said. Her eyes narrowed slightly. How? Because it proves this wasn't a misunderstanding, I replied. It was a decision. That landed. I saw it. Not on the surface, but underneath. A shift. A recalculation. You don't know what your mother was like, she said quietly. There it was. The justification. Not a denial. A reframing. I know what the report says, I replied. And I know what you made happen after. Carlos finally spoke. Anna. I raised a hand slightly. Not aggressively. Just enough. No, I said. Not this time. He stopped. Because he always stopped when it mattered. And this time I needed him to hear it. All of it. You let this happen, I said, looking at him now. You signed the paperwork. You let her control everything after. His expression tightened. I thought I know what you thought I cut in. You thought it was easier. He didn't argue. Because that was the truth. I turned back to Diane. You didn't just block letters, I said. You denied contact. You controlled the narrative. You used a system to make it permanent. She held my gaze. Unflinching. I kept you safe, she said. The words were steady, convincing, almost, from what I asked. She didn't answer. Not directly, because the answer wasn't clean. It never had been. You were a child, she said instead. You needed stability, and rewriting the truth gave you that I asked. Silence. This time, not controlled, not strategic, just silence. I closed the folder, not because I was done, but because I didn't need to prove anything else. It doesn't matter what you believed, I said. It matters what you did. Her expression hardened slightly. And what exactly do you think happens now? She asked. There it was. The question she'd been waiting to ask. Not about guilt, not about truth, about control. I met her gaze. Nothing dramatic, I said. That surprised her. I could see it. No lawsuit, she asked. Not right now, I replied. No confrontation, no attempt to fix things. I shook my head once. No. That landed harder than anything else I'd said. Because this wasn't escalation. It was withdrawal, and she didn't know how to control that. I'm documenting everything, I continued. The report, the interference, the timeline. If anything else surfaces, I'll act accordingly. Her jaw tightened slightly, but more importantly, I added, I'm done participating in this version of family. Carlos looked at me then, really looked. Anna, I'm not cutting you off, I said calmly, but I'm not protecting this either. His shoulders dropped slightly, because that was the line he couldn't avoid anymore. I stood up, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time in that house, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was taking it back. My mother tried to reach me, I said, my voice steady. For years. Diane didn't respond. She deserved better than silence, I added. Still nothing. And so did I. I walked to the door without waiting for a reply, because there wasn't one that mattered anymore. Not from them. Outside, the air felt different again, but not lighter, clearer, like something had finally settled into place. Daniel walked beside me in silence until we reached the car. You handled that well, he said. I nodded once. I handled it differently. I replied. He gave a small, understanding nod. That evening, I drove to the address Elena had given me, the small clinic, the quiet street. This time, I didn't hesitate. When she opened the door, she looked at me the same way she had before. Careful, hopeful, afraid to be wrong. I held up the folder. "I found it," I said. Her eyes filled before I even opened it, because she already knew what it meant. Not proof for the world, proof for herself, proof that she hadn't imagined it, hadn't failed the way she'd been told she had. We sat together for a long time after that, not rushing, not forcing anything, just letting the truth exist between us for the first time. It didn't fix everything. It didn't rewrite the years we lost. But it gave us something real to start from, and that mattered more than anything else. Weeks later, I packed the last box from my old apartment, not because I had to, because I wanted to. A clean space, a different structure, something that belonged entirely to me. No hidden files, no rewritten history, no one deciding what I was allowed to know. I kept the photo, the burned edges, the faint name, the date that changed everything, not as a reminder of what was taken, but as proof of what survived. Some people think justice has to be loud, visible, final. But sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's choosing not to argue with a version of the truth that was never yours. Sometimes it's stepping out of a system that was designed without your voice in it. And sometimes it's holding the evidence in your hands and deciding what it means for you. If you've ever been in a situation where your story was told for you, rewritten, minimized, or controlled, you're not alone. The hardest part isn't always finding the truth. It's deciding what to do with it once you have it. For me, healing didn't mean going back. It didn't mean restoring what was broken or pretending it never happened. It meant understanding the difference between closure and access, between forgiving someone and allowing them to keep influencing your life. You can set boundaries without anger. You can move forward without proving anything to the people who hurt you. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply say, "This ends with me." If this story resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts or your experience. And if you want more stories like this, real, grounded, and honest, consider subscribing. Just know this. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.